Dr. Piccart.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I will report later on the survival follow-up analysis of the NeoALTTO trial, which is a neoadjuvant trial conducted by the Breast International Group in women with HER2-positive breast cancer. About my disclosures first, my institute receives research support from GSK and Roche, and I have received consulting fees from Roche, not from GSK. So I can I? Oh, okay, sorry. Doesn't work.
You can use the arrow.
So let me just show you the design of the NeoALTTO trial. This was a trial that was in fact designed to explore whether dual HER2 blockade using trastuzumab and lapatinib would induce higher rates of pathological complete responses in women with HER2-positive breast cancer compared to single HER2 blockade using either trastuzumab or lapatinib. The trial was conducted in 455 women with tumors larger than 2 centimeters and assessed as locally HER2 positive, following the ASCO-CAP guidelines of 2007. These women came from 86 institutions in 23 countries and 5 continents. As you can see, the trial had 3 parallel treatment groups: oral lapatinib at the dose of 1,500 milligrams daily, or intravenous trastuzumab, or the combination of these 2 targeted agents with a slightly reduced dose of lapatinib given for 6 weeks, and then followed by an additional 12 weeks of the assigned anti-HER2 treatment given in combination with weekly paclitaxel. After surgery, patients received 3 cycles of anthracycline-based chemotherapy, 3 cycles of FEC, followed by the same targeted therapy as the one given in the neoadjuvant phase. Of note, women who had hormone receptor positive cancers started adjuvant endocrine treatment at that time. At this conference 3 years ago, Dr. Baselga reported the results regarding the primary endpoint of this trial, namely pathological complete response in the breast, in other terms, complete disappearance of invasive breast cancer in the breast. And as you can see, women given the combination of lapatinib and trastuzumab had a significantly higher pathological complete response rate. When we looked separately at the 2 subgroups according to hormone receptor status, you see that the most striking results were achieved in women with hormone receptor negative disease. And there you can see that these women achieved a pathological complete response rate as high as 61% with the combination of the 2 targeted drugs, in comparison with 36% with trastuzumab alone, which is still the standard of care. So clearly, the critical question is whether or not the incremental gain in PCR observed with dual HER2 blockade will translate into improved event-free survival and overall survival. So I need to give some important definitions here, because now, in accordance with FDA recommendation, when I'm going to talk about PCR, I'm now going to refer to no invasive disease in the breast and in the axilla. Event-free survival events are defined as differently for patients who did or did not undergo breast cancer surgery. Of course, the majority of patients did undergo breast cancer surgery. For those, event-free survival events consist in post-surgery breast cancer recurrences, second primary cancers, and death. For the 28 patients who did not undergo breast cancer surgery, these events consist in regional or distant progression or secondary primary cancer during neoadjuvant treatment or death during clinical follow-up. Now, it's very important to remember that the NeoALTTO trial is not powered to look at survival differences. The curves I'm showing here are therefore intended to be descriptive. What you can see here is the event-free survival curve for the entire population. And in green, the upper curve refers to dual HER2 blockade, and the two other curves to single HER2 blockade. The hazard ratio is 0.78, so there is a 22% reduction in the risk of an event, but of course, this is not statistically significant. Please note that the 3-year event-free survival rates are 84% for women receiving the combination, 76% for women treated with trastuzumab. We did an analysis according to hormone receptor status, and this analysis is very interesting because it suggests that the divergence of the curves is much more pronounced in the hormone receptor negative HER2 positive subgroup, where there could well be a possible treatment effect. Overall survival, well, we have very few events at this point in time, so these analyses do not show very much, as you can see. And the same is true for analysis according to hormone receptor status. Now, interestingly, we did look at the association between pathological complete response independently from the treatment arm and event-free survival. And you can see that we could very nicely confirm that women who achieve a PCR, the red curve, have a much improved event-free survival as compared to those who do not achieve a PCR. And here we are talking about a hazard ratio of 0.38, so a reduction in the risk of an event by 62%. The p-value is statistically significant, 0.0003. Again, when we do an analysis according to hormone receptor status, we do see a much bigger divergence of the curves in the hormone receptor negative patients. The hazard ratio there is 0.34, and the p-value is statistically significant. Overall survival by PCR, we also see a very strong association with an improved survival for women achieving a PCR. You see that the hazard ratio is 0.35, the p-value is statistically significant, and once again, when we do the analysis according to hormone receptor status, we see a much bigger treatment effect in hormone receptor negative disease. So the conclusions are that, first of all, patients who achieved PCR had significantly better event-free survival and overall survival compared with no PCR. This was from a landmark analysis. I can go back to that if you wish later on. Now, very importantly, the NeoALTTO trial was powered to detect PCR differences, and it met its primary endpoint. It did show a significant improvement in PCR for dual HER2 blockade. It was not powered to detect moderate differences in event-free survival and overall survival. It is the very large ALTTO trial with the recruitment of 8,300 women that will provide a robust answer on the effect of dual HER2 blockade on long-term outcome, and we expect this trial to report results at ASCO next year. At approximately 4-year median follow-up and in line with previous observations by other investigators, dual HER2 blockade appears to provide superior benefit in terms of PCR, event-free survival, overall survival in patients with HER2-positive hormone receptor negative disease. A follow-up analysis of NeoALTTO is planned in 2.5 years. It is possible that with longer follow-up, we will also see a bigger treatment effect in the hormone receptor positive subgroup. But clearly, this trial provides further evidence that HER2-positive hormone receptor negative and HER2-positive hormone receptor positive subgroups are two different diseases. In terms of adverse events, I had no time to show that to you today, but there were no surprises. They were consistent with the known safety profile of lapatinib and trastuzumab. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, questions here.
Hi, Caroline Helwick, ASCO Post. I have a couple questions. What would you do then for hormone receptor positive patients in terms of neoadjuvant therapy based on these results?
I would definitely, at this point in time, not change the standard of care, which is still to treat these patients with chemotherapy and trastuzumab. By the way, the results I've shown here also do not indicate that we should change the standard of care as yet. So also for hormone receptor negative patients, the standard of care remains trastuzumab and chemotherapy. But what this trial indicates to us is that it is possible that for this particular subgroup, hormone receptor negative HER2 positive, we could potentially use the neoadjuvant model to speed up approval of new agents. Right. And that's encouraging because you know that adjuvant trials in breast cancer take forever, are very time and money consuming, require thousands of patients. So that would be really good news.
So this trial is really great support for that concept that's before the FDA right now for the use of PCR and neoadjuvant.
Yes, well, that's my point of view, but again, for the hormone receptor negative patients, because it's a more, I think, a more homogeneous population, and also events tend to occur at the beginning of the disease. For the hormone receptor positive patients, you know, they are kind of slow actors. Right. We have to wait longer, and then endocrine therapy comes into the picture after surgery.
Okay. One more question. Would pertuzumab perhaps be a better partner for trastuzumab in neoadjuvant? I mean, is lapatinib? I know at the time that study was planned, that's what you had, but considering newer agents, would that be better?
Well, certainly, if you look at safety issues, I think the answer would be yes. But of course, we never know which strategy is best in whom unless we do a head-to-head comparison. It could be that there are differences there, but we won't know unless we compare.
Is this the first HER2 blockade study, dual blockade study?
Well, I think this is, together with NeoSphere, which was a similar trial using the combination of trastuzumab and pertuzumab, this is the first and largest neoadjuvant trial. There have been smaller trials, but this one is one of the largest indeed, and it's the first one reporting on long-term outcome. Well, long-term, 3-year, 4-year outcome.
Okay, so to repeat, it's the largest dual blockade study to date, and it's the first one
together with the NeoSphere, yeah. Because that's another neoadjuvant trial of 400 patients, okay, but using a different strategy, trastuzumab and pertuzumab instead of trastuzumab and lapatinib.
Okay. And can you repeat what the significance of this is with regard to the marker that the FDA is now looking at? I mean, the FDA is now looking at. Is it significant in terms of the FDA's plan to use PCR as a marker in a broad sense, or just for these two drugs?
Oh, I don't think I can comment beyond HER2-positive breast cancer. I think we will get a definitive answer to this question in June, because there we will have the results of the ALTTO trial, and this trial is really powered to look at the impact of dual HER2 blockade on disease-free survival. And so if it turns out that dual HER2 blockade improves disease-free survival in the ALTTO trial, particularly in the hormone receptor negative subgroup, then I think we have a very strong story there, with NeoALTTO showing this trend very strongly, and then ALTTO confirming. And then I think, yes, I would tend to agree that we could think of registering new drugs for these women, first on the basis of a positive neoadjuvant trial, and then looking later at long-term outcomes.
And let me just add in there that there are multiple studies for neoadjuvant just for HER2, but this goes across the board with triple-negative breast cancer, hormone receptor positive breast cancer, and did lead to the first FDA approval of pertuzumab in the neoadjuvant setting, which is something that is currently available to patients. So to just support what Dr. Piccart said, that PCR and what she's showing today, in my opinion, shows that it continues to be a very valid surrogate endpoint, continues to be a point of how we can develop new drugs, get them to patients quicker, with a smaller number of patients involved, and less cost.
Is that the big story here for you today?
Yeah.
For me, PCR standing out as a continued strong surrogate endpoint for me is
I would agree, yeah.
the continued importance of this study.
Okay, Crystal Fenn with MedPage Today. 2 questions. One, how long are these patients going to continue to be followed?
Up to 10 years.
Okay.
Because this is an academic study, we got support to follow patients up to 10 years.
Do you expect that with further follow-up, maybe 5-7 years, you're going to start to see those curves becoming significant?
It's possible. You know, we deliberately chose to do this analysis at 3 years following the last breast cancer surgery, but it's entirely possible that the results will be stronger with a follow-up of 5 years. Yeah.
And then my other question was with regard to what proportion of women with breast cancer have HER2 positive, hormone receptor negative versus hormone receptor positive?
Okay, so about 1 in 5 women has HER2 positive breast cancer, and in this population you have about 50% who have tumors expressing hormone receptors and 50% not expressing hormone receptors. And we more and more believe that these are different diseases, that they would require different approaches.
Lynn Peterson from Trends in Medicine. So when women see these data, even though you weren't powered to show a survival benefit for your negative patients, it was significant. So how aren't they going to want this dual therapy? I mean, you're saying that you want to wait, but are the women going to want to wait? Or
well, hopefully,
are other panel members going to go home and use the combination?
You know, hopefully the ALTTO trial will report results in only 6 months from now. So that's going to be very interesting, I think. But currently the differences are not statistically significant. You have a strong trend, but they are not statistically significant. So I don't think we should tomorrow switch to a new standard of care. There is also increased toxicity. I had no time to discuss that, but there is definitely increased toxicity also.
All right, thank you. Dr. Litt, we're ready for the next speaker.